Hi, everybody. It's JT from the CC and JT Amateur Hour, and joining me today is Cassidy Carson and Suzanne Morgan Williams. We're doing our weekly podcast of the Nevada Author Network, a joint venture between the Sierra Arts Foundation and Two More Books LLC, in an effort to raise the visibility of the very talented group of writers that we have that are members of the Sierra Arts literary community. All three of those on the screen are members, happy members, and we are picking somebody. We're picking on somebody once a week to come on our podcast and talk about their books, talk about their adventures, and talk about their life. And as I said, this week we are featuring Suzanne Morgan Williams. Hello, Suzanne.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to be here. Oh, there's
Good
my
to meet
hand.
you. Actually, we have met before, though you may not remember. Cece and I remember very well. A couple of years ago, we were in the front row at your seminar for Mark Twain Days down here in Carson City, where you did a how to write Nevada things, basically. And I don't know if you remember, but the classroom was full, and there were really very good questions. It was at the community center here in Carson City. And I don't want to read Cece's mind, but I do know that I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
No, I do remember that. That was a lot of fun, and I think the exercises that we did were very helpful. I really enjoyed them.
Oh, thank you. Along with writing, I love to teach. My mom was a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. My mom used to say, once you're a teacher, you never stop. And so even though I've spent most of my time concentrating on writing over the last many years, I really enjoy teaching. And it's one way that I let people know that I'm here and something about my work, and hopefully gain enough respect from the teaching that somebody wants to open up my book and read it, because I think I have some important things to say.
Okay.
So,
Suzanne, we've spent some time this morning and this week looking at your website. Very extensive and very well-planned website. Some writers seem somewhat challenged by websites, but yours is very good. And we learned quite a bit about yourself. So could you tell us more about yourself and tell us about your books, please?
Okay, first I want to comment on my website. My husband is techie. And the poor man, I go in and I say, I need this, and he says, send me the text. I am lucky to have the support of my husband on that. But as for me, I was a teacher, I was a mom, my family was in some sort of crisis, and I turned to writing to kind of work my way through it. And the result after many years has been 14 books. Most of them are nonfiction. They're all written for kids 10 and up is what I say, because many of my readers are adults, particularly of this book, and I'm going to try and get it on the screen. This is always interesting. It's backwards, I think, but that's my novel, Bull Rider. It's from Simon & Schuster, and it is a book that I'm very, very proud of, and here's the story behind it. During the Iraq War, I had a son-in-law who was in the service, and I encountered an editor who asked me to write a book for her series that she was producing. And we went through several ideas, and she ended up saying, write me a book about bull riders. Well, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I was sitting on a deck in New Mexico, and I started planning this bull rider's family. And it would be some kid who lived in central Nevada, because I'm enamored with Nevada, as most of us are. And as I planned his family, I thought, who is in it? And he had an older brother, and I thought, well, his older brother's in the service. But I didn't really want to deal with that too much, so I kind of sent him off to the service. And then as the book progressed and it went, that didn't work out, and we know that sometimes there are different iterations. We ended up with Bull Rider, where the story couldn't get away from me. What if his brother was injured? What if his brother was seriously injured and came home from Iraq with that injury? And through my research, I learned that the major injuries in those Middle Eastern wars was a traumatic brain injury. And I did a lot of research. I visited the VA hospital in Palo Alto. I talked to people who work with people with TBIs. I talked to veterans. And because of where I live here in Pleasant Valley area in Nevada, I had cows running across the street, and I'd watched them get branded, and I talked to ranchers. And the result is Bull Rider, which is a novel about a 14-year-old boy who lives in a fictional, please take this clearly, it's a fictitious city in central Nevada. All those people in there are not your cousins or aunts. And he's a skateboarder. He doesn't want to be a bull rider like the rest of his family. His brother, who's in the Marines, is the Nevada State High School bull riding champion. Well, he's waiting for his brother to come home on leave. And instead of coming home on leave the way he'd planned, his brother Ben is in an IED explosion and ends up evacuated and in Walter Reed and then finally at the VA hospital in Palo Alto. And the whole family is turned upside down. And all Cam, the protagonist, wants is for his brother and everything else to go back to normal. So instead of being excited about the skateboard competition that he was practicing for, now he's trying to figure out really how to fix his family, which is a big lift for a 14-year-old. And that is the story of Bull Rider. Now the rest of the story, as one of the radio commentators used to say, is that after Bull Rider came out, it won a number of awards, including a Western Heritage Award from the National Western Heritage and Cowboy Museum in Oklahoma City, which they call the Cowboy Oscars, and I was there the same day that Magnum PI got his. And it was on a lot of library lists. It was Junior Library Guild, so it got out to a lot of places, and I ended up visiting all around the country. And at one time, and I told you I could talk a long time, but I'm going to do this because I want to share it. At one point, I was at the Texas Star Festival in Birdville, Texas. And I was the honored speaker, which it was a little embarrassing because I don't consider myself an honored speaker. I think of myself still as a mom and a grandma. But I was preparing for the lunch, and the reason the kids from all over the school district in 7th and 8th grade had to earn their way to this lunch by reading at least 12 books off of the Texas Star list. Well, I'm in the bathroom, and this girl comes in. She was from Iraq. She was wearing a hijab, and we talked. She said, "Oh, my teacher said I shouldn't talk to you if I'm in the bathroom." And I said, "Well, we can say hello." And she said, "I read all those books so I could meet you." And I'm like, "Really? So you can meet me?" Well, I gave this talk, we had our lunch, I came home, and 1 year later, this is what I got. Last year, I started reading my school's Texas Star books, and the first book I saw was Bull Rider, and I knew I had to read it. Once I started the book, I could not stop reading. And then she goes on, and then she says, "I was excited to see you at the celebration because my library said you were coming. I had no idea if you remember me, but I am the girl from Iraq in the headdress. I met you in the bathroom and told you that my librarian said don't bother to talk to her unless you meet her in the bathroom or something. You immediately reminded me of my grandmother." That's nice. "I took the Bull Rider book you signed for me in the celebration and have been working on translating it to Arabic with my dad for 1 year now, and I am finally done. I did that because my grandmother does not speak English and lives in Iraq, but is probably your Arabic twin in looks and personality." And then she talks about Iraq and that she hadn't had books like that. And she said, "I started reading English books and I loved it. I moved here because of the war with only my brother, sister, mom, and dad. The whole rest of my family is still in Iraq, and this book absolutely had to be sent to my family." Now, after I got that, and I read it a lot because this is, besides a letter I got from my own grandson, which is personal and I will not share, this is the reason we write. Mm-hmm. That reader is worth so much, and that's why I'm here, because I want other people to read Bull Rider, and I'm actually working on a companion book that will be out next year called Seeing Daylight. So if I have time, I'll tell you a little bit about Sierra Blue, and then we can move on, because I told you I can talk a lot.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
No, this one.
This is my book, Sierra Blue. And Sierra Blue also has an interesting story. I had written Bull Rider. It was about to come out. I was talking with my editor in Los Angeles. And because I was in Los Angeles, I had a cousin who lived there. She was a racehorse trainer and had spent her entire life since her 16th birthday working with horses and race horses, showing horses. And she is still what's called a blood agent. She trains and breeds and sells horses in Kentucky now. And she's older than I am. So she's been doing this a lot of years. Well, I just met Kathy, and then I ran into my editor, and we were talking about my next book. And I told her, I said, this woman has such an interesting story. I'd love to write something about it. And we chatted and came up with some ideas, and I started that book. Well, there was a kerfuffle in the publishing industry, as there occasionally is, and my editor was laid off, not for any reason except I'm sure it was financial. And Bull Rider was an orphaned book. I spent a lot of time promoting it, and it's done very well because of all those awards. And in the meantime, I wrote Sierra Blue. And Sierra Blue was almost picked up like 3 different times with 3 different editors, and it never got quite across the line. So that was years ago. And last year, I was at a Nevada Arts Council event in Ely, by the way. I understand that's a town you've just visited. And I ran into the programming director from the Clark County Library System. And she said, we're having a contest for independently published books. You should enter something. I said, I don't have any independently published books. They're all from various publishers. And she said, well, why don't you get one? So I thought about Sierra Blue, because this manuscript had been professionally edited a couple of times. It just hadn't gotten to publication. And it was one that I thought, it's about ready to go. I'll do it. So first it was an ebook. I hired a professional designer to make an ebook. And I was so excited to have this book out in the world that we went ahead and made a book that you can buy. And here's the story of Sierra Blue. And we have a member in our group, Stephen. Is it Stephen Provost, right? Mm-hmm. And he says independent publishing is not about giving up, it's about confidence. And I have a lot of confidence in this story. So Sierra Blue is the story of a 14-year-old girl. I think of it as this one as a companion book to Bull Rider, because Bull Rider is about a young boy who turns into the man that he ought to be. And Sierra Blue is about a young girl who becomes the girl she's meant to be, who steps into her own skin. She has premonitions. She sees the world in colors. She's really weird because of that, and she has been trying to hide it for 14 years. Only her mother, who tells her to be quiet and not share it, and her best friend know. And as she's entering high school in a small town in Oregon, her best friend decides it's pretty cool, tells everybody, it becomes a social media event, and she's horrified. So at the same time, her great aunt, who she's never met and lives in a fictitious town in the Sierra Nevada near Bridgeport, in my mind, suffers an accident and is unable to take care of her ranch. And Magic, which is the name of our protagonist, volunteers and says, I will help. And she's thinking, just let me get out of town. So she goes to this new town. She meets some weird people. She makes a little group of interesting and quirky friends. And then she's never going to tell anybody ever that she sees auras around animals. And because of that, she can tell their moods and also their physical characteristics, how their well-being. Well, she's never going to tell anybody until she witnesses a terrible horse trailer accident. And after the veterinarians and the police get there and they've extracted the horse with the jaws of life from the horse trailer, the vet says, we got to put this animal down. But she can tell that Sierra Blue, it turns out, that's the horse's name, could be saved. So this is the story of how she decides to first to try and manipulate things so that other people will save the horse without her having to tell how she's doing it. And through a series of missteps and hopes and changes, she finally has to step into her own life and share what she's about and why this is happening. And she trades her own safety for the horse Sierra Blue. So that's what it's about. And it's a book that appeals to young women. It appeals to older people. If you love horses or horse racing, my cousin, who is a horse racing expert, helped with those aspects. And we have a veterinarian here at Comstock Animals who helped with the veterinarian aspects. And I'm really proud of the book. So you can get that one on Amazon. Bull Rider is available in a lot of places. And I hope you'll read them, because I don't spend years of my life writing these for them to sit on the shelf or decorate someplace because they are a pretty color. So that's my introduction. It was long, but here you are.
No, that's fine. I do have a question that may fascinate you, because I don't know if you're aware, but we've also written books placed in Nevada, fictional books placed in Nevada. And we've asked this question of other Nevada writers who wrote about Nevada. What do you find fascinating enough to place your books in the Silver State? And obviously, the easy answer is, well, I live here. So, but there's something that captures fiction writers about the Silver State, and we've gotten some interesting answers. What is it that about Nevada that has you placing two well-researched, award-winning books here?
I'm going to give you a story, because authors are storytellers. We moved here 26 years ago after living up and down the West Coast for my husband's job. It's one of the reasons I became a writer, because I kept having to change teaching jobs, and it's like I need something that'll go with me, and it's what I wanted to do. So anyway, we'd been here about a year, and our son was still in high school, and he's a rock nut, and he wanted to go opal hunting. So we drove way north up by the Nile, and there's a woman up there where you give her $10 and she gives you a bucket and a rock hammer, and you can walk up the mountain next to her trailer and look for opals, which is what we did. Well, having lived most recently at that time in the Bay Area, but also in Tacoma, Washington, and Bremerton, Washington, and Medford, Oregon, and outside of Portland, and grew up with my grandparents a lot in the Central Valley in California, I'm walking up this mountain. We get to the top, and I looked around, and the only thing I could see was sagebrush and rocks and her trailer. And I'm like, this is the way the world used to be. It was silent. I had a dog who was panting. That's what I could hear. That's what I love about Nevada. You can go from Vegas or downtown Reno, and in 20 minutes, you can be somewhere where you hear your own heartbeat, and you see the sky, and you know there are such different experiences in this world, and they change according to what you're used to and where you are. So that's why.
Your answer speaks to us. Absolutely.
Yes.
Your answer speaks to us, because we're in that same place, and it's if you're not here, you don't understand here. But once you get here, you can't leave here.
I would agree. It's a secret we kind of want to keep, but at the same time, it's so amazing. You know, I had a trip to the Arctic. I've had 4 of them. I was working on another project, which is yet unpublished and probably won't be for a number of reasons. But that changed my life. And when I was in the Arctic and I was on the sea ice looking around, I had a guide with me, and it was him and me and his sled. I may have told you the story when we were in the class in Carson City. But anyway, we're standing on the sea ice, and it's the same feeling that it's you and the natural world and the creator, however you envision that or don't. And it brings you into a centered place with yourself, and it's life-changing.
No, it really is.
Stacey, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say that I also grew up in the Central Valley of California and came to Nevada my senior year of high school, and was not happy with the whole experience because I was a high school senior, moved out to a very remote part of Nevada. But after JT and I got married, went away, and we came back, really seeing it again as an adult, and then going back to California and seeing that, I so much prefer this area. And it's for the reasons that you mentioned, because it is, you go a short distance and you get the freedom to just be yourself out in the world.
That's really cute. I got to tell you another story. The first year we were here, my husband and I drove out Highway 50, which is a lot more busy now than it used to be. But we got out past Fallon, and for those of you who don't know where this is, get your map out and look. And we weren't yet to the sand mountain. Mm-hmm. And I said, pull the car over. And he did, and we got out and we danced in the middle of the freeway. Now, I
That's
don't think I'd
awesome.
do that now. I wouldn't want an 18-wheeler coming at me, but that was the joy.
Yep. We just did that road. We just did Highway 50. We went to Ely and came back, and we were thinking that. And you've seen on Highway 50 the ranches that are out there, and in the quote unquote middle of nowhere. Well, that's where they are. But we were thinking every night they would see the Milky Way. But you know what I'm saying? Every night the sky would be open to them, and they could see everything you'd see the stars comprise the Milky Way, which must be a wondrous sight.
Yeah. They have that Dark Skies initiative, and a lot of the places on 50, Ely and Baker are on that. And I just had the joy of presenting to much of the town of Baker, Nevada, which is outside the gates to the Great Basin National Park. It's a town of, Liz said it was 120. If you look on Wikipedia, it's between 40 and 60. I think it depends on how far they count the edges. And I knew it was a dark skies area, and I was really excited to stay out there and look at the stars, but there was a full moon. So we're going to have to go back and make sure there's a new moon.
Okay, so you've got a book that you're working on or getting near done at Daylight. Could you give
Seeing
us
Daylight.
Can you give us the 411 on the Daylight?
Yeah, so Seeing Daylight is another book that was written years ago, and I wrote that in response to my readers of Bull Rider, because they kept saying, well, what happened after that? And of course, kids want a series. Publishers want a one-off book and then see how it does, and then you might get a series. And then, like I said, my editor went on to be a very successful independent editing kind of person in New York. And I didn't have anybody to do the next one, but I was working on it. So Seeing Daylight is Ben's story. Ben is the older brother in Bull Rider. So it's the same O'Mara family. They live in Salt Lick, Nevada. They are a rodeo family and a ranching family. Cam has successfully done what he wanted to do for his brother, although it turned out differently than he'd imagined. And what happens to Ben? I mean, he came home from Iraq unable to walk or talk. He has a TBI. It turns out he has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And although his family is supporting him and his friends have come to help him, what happened to him? So this is Ben's story. And it's, fortunately or unfortunately, the story of many returned veterans, which I think makes it absolutely relevant now, as well as when I began to write it. And it's the story of when he returns from Iraq, he goes into a depression because his life isn't the same. He's no longer a champion bull rider. He can't do what he used to do. He can't help out on the ranch the way he used to. He's lost an arm. At the beginning of the book, he's still using a walker, and he's mad and depressed, and he doesn't really know how to continue. He absolutely does not want to do therapy because that's what we people do, and he's been a Marine. So this is the story of how a chance meeting with his younger sister Lolly, who owns goats and lives on the ranch. How his younger sister Lolly's gym teacher, who has her gymnastics teacher, who has her own problems with her family, which is falling apart, an encounter with her and the fact that she wants to train a service dog because that's what her mom does, and her mom's not paying enough attention to her, intersects with Ben's pretty much refusal to get help. And through a rescue dog named Roger, who I tell you, it took hours of finding the dog that is Roger, and we have done it. There's a picture that's going to go on the cover. Through Roger and Molly, who, spoiler, she becomes a love interest finally. His life changes, and he learns to move forward. So that's the story of Seeing Daylight. And it's a pretty emotional one. It's more YA than Bull Rider was. I talked with injured veterans. I visited facilities that help them. I went to Canine Companions in Santa Rosa, and a place called Freedom Dogs in Oceanside, California, which actually uses service dogs with the men and women who are in the Wounded Warriors unit of the Marine Corps. And they live in Oceanside. They're still on active duty. And there's explanations of that in both books. But it was a very moving experience to talk with these people. And then another really weird thing that happened was after I wrote Bull Rider, my own daughter she had worked with, I'm not sure where she'd been she'd been working with like grant writing and stuff like that, and she was married to a serviceman at the time, and she got a job with the Department of Defense contractor, and her job was education about traumatic brain injury. And I'd already written this book, and we didn't know that was going to happen. So she's going out around the country talking about traumatic brain injury. And when I met people who would come to me after my talks and say, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it that somebody's thinking about this, but we don't know where to turn. My uncle is, and then they would describe it. And I could hand them my daughter's card, and I'd say, you contact her and she's going to connect you. And in the same way, there were many things she was not allowed to say, but that I could share. And it was kind of a what do you call it? It was synchronistic event. So that's another part of the Bull Rider and now Seeing Daylight story. And I'm thinking Seeing Daylight will be out beginning of 2026 because I need time to do the pre-marketing and reviews and stuff.
Okay. We're certainly looking forward to it.
Yes.
Okay, so one last chance to sell yourself. Please tell people who are watching about your where to find your website. And again, you already mentioned it, but remind us where we can find your books.
Okay. My website is Suzanne Morgan Williams. You can see it on the bottom of the screen there, how it's spelled, .com. And it's easy. It's the whole thing. But be sure you put the Morgan in, because there's another Suzanne Williams who writes for children. And she's very nice. We've met each other, but we write really different books. She writes for like first graders, and I write for people who are 10 and up.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's the website. I'm on Facebook under the same name. It's a public spot, so you can go look me up there. As far as books, Bull Rider is available easily to order through your independent bookstore. It's in all the normal places. You can get it through Simon & Schuster. It's still in print after many years, which is not always true. I'm proud of that. Here it is, Bull Rider, that way, by Suzanne Morgan Williams. Sierra Blue, because it's independently published, is easily available through Amazon. You can contact me on my website, and I can send you a little book plate with my signature on it. It's also available through Ingram, so you can order it through your independent bookstore, ask for it. The ISBN is on my website, along with interviews and different things. The one thing I will say is it may be more expensive, and if you want to support your independent bookstore, please do it. They need that help, but if you need to save some money, Amazon's probably cheaper. The other place you can go is bookshop.org, and that is a place that will mail you the book, and it will take part of their profits and support local independent bookstores. So those are my suggestions for where to find the book.
Okay, and thank you for mentioning bookshop.org, because I hadn't heard that one, so I'll check that out after we get through.
Oh, do check that out. The other thing I'd like to say, because this is coming out June 25th, is I will be at the Eastern Sierra Book Festival in Mammoth Lakes, California on July 19th. So if you want to meet me and buy the books and support an independent bookstore there, I'll be there along with a lot of other authors.
Okay, sounds good. So, thank you, Suzanne Morgan Williams, for joining us today. Learned a lot about you, learned about fascinating stuff. So, gosh, you are such an interesting person. But like I said, we knew that when we first sat in your class a couple of years ago. So, thank you. This podcast and other podcasts can be found through the Two More Books website at twomorebooks.com. Again, this is a partnership with the Sierra Arts Foundation to elevate the visibility of Nevada writers like Suzanne and ourselves. Please, please, please check out the website, check out our books, and as Suzanne said, please support independent writers, especially Nevada independent writers. Thank you again, Suzanne.
Oh, you're welcome. It's
Thank
been
you.
delightful. I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, everybody take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.